everyone, and thanks for joining us once again in our News West 9 kitchen. Today we are talking about eating disorders, and joining me right now is Danielle Moreno. She is a community health educator with the city of Midland, and I'm glad we're talking about this topic because it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and that kind of ties into eating disorders as well. But first, let's talk about the different types of eating disorders. Can you name some of them?
Yeah, so with the DSM-5, there's actually 5 different types of eating disorders. So you have anorexia, which people have issues eating food, right? So they eat very little, or they just don't eat enough to sustain their body because their body image is not where they want it to be. So they just don't eat food. And then you have avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. That one is going to be is a newer one to the DSM-5, but it's a little common. So what that one is it limits the amount of food that you consume, but you're not necessarily worried about your body shape or your image. Then you also have other specified food or eating disorders. This one is a classification where people don't fall into your base criteria for like anorexia, bulimia, or binge eating, but it's still some type of eating disorder. And then you do have binge eating disorder, which is where you eat a ton of food, usually pretty quickly, but you don't regurgitate it. And then you have bulimia, which is where you eat a ton of food, but then you kind of regret what you did. You have some sort of inability to see what you just took in was maybe not necessarily great for you, but was something that you needed, so you automatically get rid of it. So you purge it to make yourself feel better for taking in all those extra calories. So those are going to be your different, your 5 main eating disorders, but your common types are going to be anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder.
And so another thing too is that usually when we think of anorexia or bulimia, it's targeted with a lot of women, but men can also have EDs as well, right?
Right. So it is more common in women. Yeah. It is more common in women than in men. But men actually deal with binge eating more than women do. I know that may sound weird, but so it's kind of common, right, for men to take in a lot of food and be like, oh yeah, this is fine. It's fine for a guy to eat 20 tacos. You don't think of anything of it. But if a girl eats 20 tacos, you're like, oh, she went a little crazy, right? But for men to do that, it's kind of like, oh, it's a macho thing. It's what you do. But in reality, that's binge eating. They may not necessarily care about the effects and what causes it, but it still gives them that sense of control. Because at the end of the day, when you have an eating disorder, it's trying to take back some sort of control that you lost.
I see. Very interesting. Okay. And when we talk about the misconceptions of certain types of eating disorders, what are some things that people seem to get wrong?
Yeah, so there are a few, there's actually a lot of them, but a couple of them are going to be one, that an eating disorder is something that you can control. It's not really something that you can control. It's something that is very much a mental illness as well as a physical illness. So it's not something that you can just kind of get and be like, oh, I can just start eating food again, or, I can have that cheeseburger. It'll be fine. Just put on some weight, or, I can go ahead and not throw this up. So there's a lot of trauma and a lot of genetics, other things that play a part into this that cause you to have those issues. So another thing is, with eating disorders, a lot of people think that of anorexia, right? Somebody that's really, really tiny, and that's, you can see skin and bones, and that's what an eating disorder is. Well, in reality, people like you and me can have eating disorders too. The difference and why this is such like a stigma that hurts so many people is that when you have this eating disorder, and you don't look like you have that eating disorder, sometimes it may feel like, oh, I have this eating disorder, but I'm not good at my eating disorder, and so I don't need help. Or because these people are much better at it, I need to get to that level before I need help. I'm fine. It's not a big deal. But in reality, you're still hurting your body. You're still, causing irreparable damage to your organs, to your, your throat, your teeth, different things like that.
Wow. And so what about the long-term effects when it comes to even certain types like bulimia, for example, or anorexia? Are there long-term effects that continue on even after?
Yes, yeah. So there are a ton of long-term effects that can happen. So you have like osteoporosis is a big one because of the fact that you are depriving your body of all that food and that nutrition. You can't sustain your bones, right? So they start getting really brittle. Your hair and your nails will start getting really brittle as well. You also run into organ failure. So that's a big thing. So if you have an eating disorder, they will check all your organs. They will check your blood work and everything to make sure that your liver's functioning or that you know, just because all that happens. They also check your cardiovascular health too, because your heart is working so much because you're not giving it what it needs. And that's what a lot of people, when it comes to the point where they can't really turn back, or you find out that they have that eating disorder, is a lot of them will go in because they have cardiovascular issues, right? They think they're having a heart attack, different things like that. Well, most of them are, because their heart is working so much. So that could be some of those long-term effects. And of course, a big one is going to be death.
Okay, wow.
Yes.
Let's talk about, okay, so we have a graphic that we can pull up in a second of the signs of bulimia versus anorexia. Let's see if we can get that up and just kind of explain that a little bit. I know you're kind of talking on it a little bit. So there are some people out there who don't even realize that they have an eating disorder. What are some signs, I guess, that they should, you know,
look for?
Yeah,
so there are a lot of different signs when it comes to eating disorders that you should look for. So like with anorexia, you do have those people that have dramatic weight loss. You also have, again, you're going to look at your nails, your hair is going to be a big sign, as well as your fatigue level is going to be really, really low. Also, you're going to have a lot of people that are very cold, and you're going to see them wearing a lot of big clothes. And some of that does have to do with the fact that they do have that body image dysmorphia that they're dealing with, but it's because their body is freezing because they can't sustain their body heat because they have nothing to go off of. So there's a lot of different things that comes with those different disorders. And then of course, you know, when you go towards bulimia, you have a lot of the issues when it comes to like your teeth, right? So, and your mouth, and also the acid when it comes up when you're vomiting. That can actually mess up your fingertips as well, because because you're throwing up, right, and you're sticking a lot of people stick their fingers down their throat, and so the acid will eat away your fingertips. And so there's just a lot of things that people don't see when it comes to eating disorders, and understand that it's not just like a top layer thing. There's so much more that goes on.
No, I didn't even know that part, because I think when most people think of bulimia, they just think, oh, throwing up, get skinny, But that's an interesting thing. And then also the physical signs. What are other physical signs for other eating disorders as well?
So physical signs, there's going to be, again, it's going to be like your hair. You'll have sleep problems. You'll also have like some dizziness when you're standing up, because again, you're not giving your body that nutrition you need. You're also going to have a lot of muscle weakness. Sometimes you'll have a hard time breathing as well. So irregular menstrual cycles is a really big part of that as well, in any eating disorder. Your skin can change color, kind of get like a yellow tone tint to it.
And is this on top of like the binge eating as well, or is this only with?
So this, this is going to be causes from all eating disorders. Of course, each eating disorder has its own symptoms and signs you need to watch out for that are a little more specific to that eating disorder. But there are, like for instance, with the one that was just up there, a lot of those are going to be for all eating disorders. It's not going to be just a specific one. So if you're eating too much food, it's going to get you tired, right? If you're not eating enough food, it's going to get you tired. Again, with muscle weakness, if I'm eating nothing, my muscles are going to be hurting because I'm not giving them what they need. But also if I'm eating too much, then again, you're putting too much fat and stuff in there. So it's all kind of a give and take, just depending on what you're looking at.
So what about this part where it says fine hair on the body?
Yeah, so your average man or woman, you'll have hair all over, right? That's just kind of how we are. But when you have an eating disorder, so like if you look at your hair on your arm, or you look at the hair on your legs, that's going to be thicker hair that you're going to have there, or other body parts, you'll have thicker hair, right? But if you have an eating disorder, again, because you're lacking all the base nutrition that you need,
it thins it out.
It thins it out. Or you may also have patches. So you'll have some parts of your leg that will have hair and some parts that won't. So it just kind of depends on how severe that eating disorder is.
Does that affect hair on the head too?
It does, yes.
No kidding.
So you, that is actually another sign to look out for too, is like if somebody is usually have, you know, of course everybody can cut their hair. Like I recently cut a lot of hair off.
Which looks great, by the way.
Thank you. But if you have somebody that has longer hair and they start styling it a little different because they want to hide, you know, spots on their head, or if they just cut it all and then like start wearing a ball cap all the time, well, there's something that they may be trying to hide from you. And most family members don't really think much of that, but those are just little signs that you should watch out for.
I see. And then as far as the emotional traits, can someone have a certain type of personality when it comes, I guess the people who most likely have certain characteristics that can lead to eating disorders, like addictive personality, for example?
Yeah, so there are some things like that come with that. Like I said, you do have some different things that play into that. So if you have a high level of harm avoidance, if you're pessimistic, you're shy, if you have different emotional issues, anxiety, if you're a perfectionist, that also comes into play with that. Those are some of those traits that you may have, because like I said, in the end, eating disorders come down to that control. So there was some sort of trauma, some sort of event that happened, or even if you have a job that focuses on your weight, you have all these stressors that come into play, and because you need that control, you either starve yourself or you give yourself too much.
Wow. And a lot of people don't think about how some eating disorders can lead to suicide as well.
Right. Yeah. So amongst eating disorders, suicide is one of the top ways that people kind of get out of it, because a lot of people don't realize that it is so close to an addiction. It's not something you can control. And so if I'm fighting with it for so long, I'm doing all these treatments, doing everything, or you just kind of give up, suicide is an option there. A lot of deaths come from suicide when it comes to eating disorders, or just come from the fact that your body gives out.
I see. And then let's talk about student athletes. Okay, so like wrestling, for example, when students are trying to move up a weight class or go down a weight class, can that still classify as an eating disorder as well, even though it's still involved with the school and things like that?
Yeah, so that's where with the DSM-5, that last one is going to come into play. Like I said, this is a newer one. So
yeah.
That one's going to be that other specified feeding or eating disorders, because it doesn't fit the criteria of your main ones, which is like bulimia, anorexia, different things like that. But it's still there, especially if you're doing it over a long period of time. A lot of people don't realize that student athletes can start having an eating disorder from dealing with the pressures and stuff from school. I know, when you in Midland, in Odessa, volleyball and football are a really big deal here. So if you need to lose a little weight to get that height for that jump, when you're playing volleyball, or if you need to put on a little bit of weight so that way you can get that tackle and make that go over the right way. Having those constant weight demands on you, and it may not be something that, your coach comes out and straight tells you, you need to lose weight or you need to put on weight.
Yeah.
But it's known, right? It's like, oh, if you were to bulk up a little bit more, oh, if you just slim down just a little bit, you can get a little higher. And that's a lot of them how it starts. And they may have already had those issues, because now they're seeing as young as 6 years old are starting to deal with eating disorders. So it could be one of those things that I already thought of that, maybe if I did that, that might help me. And now my coach is pushing me and saying, oh, that's okay to do. So yeah, why wouldn't I do it? And then that can lead to that anorexia, different things like that.
And so with that being said, if there's a parent watching right now who maybe has a child who's athletic, what are some things that maybe they could take with them just to prevent, their child from going deep into an eating disorder?
So I would definitely say watch them. I've had kids that were playing sports, very competitive sports, and they got put on specific diets and stuff because, they wanted them to be a certain way. Yeah. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with dieting. There's nothing wrong with paying attention to what you're eating healthy, keeping a healthy weight. But just make sure that they're eating what's necessary and they're not starving themselves, or that it's not something that's too extreme that they can't sustain. Because that's one of those things that comes into play too, where like, yeah, everybody does those fad diets, everybody does something where they lose all that weight, right? But if I do it and then I gain all that weight back, what's an easy way for me to something to turn to get it out real fast? Yeah. Right? So that's just kind of what you have to watch your kids and talk to them about it. I mean, that's a really big issue that we're seeing with a lot of things when it comes to kids, is that parents aren't talking to their kids about these things. And if you're not talking to them about them, how do you expect them to know? Or what to look out for? And also make sure that you know the signs of the different eating disorders. Do a little bit of research. It doesn't, take too long. There's sites that you can get all of them on one site. Just kind of know what those signs are and be on the look for them.
Which is why you're here.
Yes.
Yeah, to educate everyone.
Yes.
Okay, so when doctors are testing people for certain types of eating disorders, how exactly do they do this test? I mean, do they have a chart and then they ask them like where they fit on that scale, or how does it work?
So when doctors, they do different tests, right? So they have a psychological test that they'll do, because that is a big part of eating disorders, is mental. The other thing that they will do is they'll do a physical exam. So those physical exams, they'll do blood work, because they need to check, your hemoglobins, all that kind of stuff, to see where you are. They'll also check your weight. So especially with kids, they'll check it against the chart and see, where does their BMI land? Where's their height? Are they where they need to be in the percentile they need to be in for their age? Same thing with adults. They'll check all of that information as well. They'll also check your teeth. They'll do a quick dental exam. Even your primary care physician will kind of look over that to see if you are, throwing up, and seeing how if that acid is there. If they suspect eating disorder is something that's been going on for a while, they may even have you go do some cardiovascular tests to make sure that there's no damage there, as well as like organ checks as well.
I see. And we're kind of in a weird age right now of social media. Kids are always on their phones, and I've seen trends with, the thigh gap or the belly button trend on TikTok. How damaging is that, especially for kids nowadays?
So it's pretty damaging, honestly. So like I said, going into this, a lot of people are thinking, eating disorders are older. Before, eating disorders were more common between like your 18-year-olds and your 22, 23-year-olds.
Right.
Now, like I said, it's starting as young as 5, 6 years old that you're having these issues. And it's also increasing in people in their 40s. So we have such a Western culture of skinny is perfect, right? Size 0, size 2. But that's not something that everyone can maintain or everybody can do. Everybody's body type is different, right? So you can't expect everybody to be that way. Now, should you be totally overweight? No, of course, that's a whole other aspect. But when it comes to social media, everybody's posting everything. So I'm posting you what I did today, what I did tomorrow, what I'm eating today, what I'm eating tomorrow, right? A lot of that does have that irreparable damage on kids, because they see that and they're like, this is what I'm supposed to look like, this is what I'm supposed to be. And sometimes it's unrealistic expectations that you're putting on them.
It's so unrealistic.
Yes.
And Photoshop is a thing.
Yes,
so
especially now with that new filter on TikTok.
Is scary.
People cannot even create the look that TikTok is giving them. And it's like now the fact that you don't even need, you can move in the filters, they're just so realistic now.
So what Danielle is explaining is there is now an AI filter that recognizes your face. So even if you go like this, it still shows you with a full face of makeup, even if you're not wearing makeup. So social media is not real. I mean, what is perceived on there is, just tell your kids that, just always remind them for sure. Okay, so for eating disorder treatment, what types of treatment are available for anyone who is suffering?
Yeah, so there are a few different things. So there's, of course, psychological treatment where they'll go and be able to speak to a therapist, kind of see what's going on, what that underlying issue is. There's nutritional therapy, so that way they can kind of get where they need to be with their body and nutrition there. There's also inpatient therapy, so if an inpatient treatment. So if you have somebody that's on like a really, really far end of whatever disorder, and they just cannot do it by themselves with family support, or just going to somebody and talking to them, they can go somewhere into a treatment center, and they can help them work through all those issues 24 hours. Because sometimes you do need that monitoring and that constant physical check-in with somebody that's not family. So
do some insurance companies cover eating disorders? Do you know?
So some do. Again, that's not my full realm of
Okay,
expertise.
yeah.
But there a lot of insurance will cover something regarding eating disorders. But of course, it depends on your insurance. It depends on the state that you live in. There's a lot of fine lines that go with insurance. You have to pay your deductible, all that fun jazz. But there are a lot of things that are covered under it. You just have to ask.
Okay. And I'm curious. People can relapse, right?
They can.
Do you see that happen a lot?
So I don't really deal with a whole lot of eating disorder stuff at the health department, because we're kind of more of like an in and out thing.
Right.
So I can't speak to that fully, but it is something that does occur. It's not something that once you get over an eating disorder, you're done.
You're right.
A lot of people think that's what it is. It's super easy, but like I said, it's kind of it's in the ballpark of an addiction, right? You have something, you're dealing with it, you have that emotional trauma and stuff, and it's not that easy to get over with. You can be great and not have any of those signs for 5-10 years, and then something traumatic happens, some sort of stressor goes off, and you go right back to that thing that you had that control over. Because like I said, at the end of the day, eating disorders are about control.
Right. Wow. And so talking a little bit, if there's someone out there, and so I saw a YouTuber who obviously has an ED, and so all her fans were saying, hey, we want to help, but she doesn't want any help. If someone has somebody like that in their life you can obviously tell they're struggling, how do you go about it without looking too pushy, or how do you address and have those conversations in a safe way that's not, triggering for that person?
Right. So eating disorders one thing that everybody needs to understand is that they are something that don't discriminate, right? Everyone has something that they can go against, or something that can go against them that can cause them. They're non-discriminatory. They don't care what race you are, what size you are, anything like that. So with that in mind, you need to go at this very open-minded. If you have somebody that has that and you decide, hey, we want to talk to them, do some sort of intervention or whatever, make sure that if you have multiple people, that it's people that care about them, and it's not somebody that's going to be very demanding of them. You want to go over what you're going to say before you go there. You want to make sure that when you're talking to them, you're not coming at them like, oh, you have this eating disorder, you're doing wrong, blah, 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 right? No, I feel that this is something that could be harmful for you. You want to use a lot of those I statements. You also want to go into it and make sure when you're talking to somebody, it's a closed environment that they feel safe in, right? You don't want to bring up an eating disorder when you're at a restaurant or at a movie theater, right? Because that's not okay. So you do want to make sure that you're in that closed off environment, and do your research on the eating disorders too. You want to make sure that you have the knowledge, so that way if they ask, well, I don't do this, well, according to, CDC or whoever, that is a sign on here. But, I just want to give you these options. I want to let you know these are the treatment options that are available. Look up those options in your local area. Know where you can send them to. Because it may be one of those things that you were that first person to talk to them about it. They may have been thinking about it, but they don't want to do it. They may do something that pushes themselves a little too far, but they have that information there that they can do it. If you think, though, that this eating disorder is going to be very, very harmful to them, or they've gotten to the point where you're just like, they need to go in, tell somebody. Tell your primary care physician. Call your mental health deputy. Have them go out there, because it could be that thing between a life and death thing.
So I didn't know that can be done, too. You can call a what is it called?
Your mental health deputy.
Mental health deputy. Interesting.
Yes. And that's usually on like those really extreme cases where they are just like so far gone. They can just kind of help you get them into a mental evaluation, and then from there they can kind of talk to them, and go a little bit further. But that could just be, that's more of an extreme step, but that's definitely an option.
Okay. What kinds of resources are available through the city for anyone who has an ED and they want to get help? What can they do?
Yeah, so we do a lot of partnership with the hospital, so they, have a nutritionist and everything on staff. We don't really have a whole lot at the health department, but you can contact me directly, and I have a lot of different resources that I can, give you, whether it be different psychiatrists, different online therapy options, or a couple of different treatment centers. Nothing, unfortunately, we don't really have anything locally. Everything's going to be, towards Dallas, El Paso, different things like that. But we do at least have those numbers for you, or those resources that we can give you.
Yeah, and that's important too, because at the end of the day, this is something that could ultimately save someone's life. So is there anything else you want to add before we
so I guess just to sum it all up, just make sure that if you have somebody that has an eating disorder, you come at it open-minded, because again, it is something that's a mental illness and it's a physical illness. It's not something that they can control. So don't use those stigmas and those misconceptions to harm them. Just kind of, come at it very open with them. And just know that eating disorders are a lot more common than what people think they are. And it can happen to anybody. So just make sure, you're not making those jokes around people, because you never know what somebody can be going through.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I hope you learned a lot from today. And if you are someone who's dealing with an eating disorder, just keep in mind that it's always okay to ask for help, and that there's no judgment whenever you're seeing a health professional. So that's going to wrap it up. Hope you guys have a great day. We'll see you next time.